I'm 42 and 6 months into my first pregnancy after 6 years of marriage to Chen Hao. Before I stepped back to run our household full-time, I was the youngest lead architect in the city's top design circle, pulling 7-figure annual contracts, headhunted by national firms every quarter. I walked away from all of it for Hao's sake. He begged me to pause my career, said his small construction firm needed a wife to handle every domestic burden so he could focus on climbing the ladder. I buried my awards, locked my client network away, and shrank my entire life to his schedule, his ego, his endless demands for frugality that only ever applied to me. For months straight, crippling hyperemesis gravidarum wrecked my body till I couldn't keep rice, soup, or plain toast down. Only dark sweet cherries calmed the burning acid clawing at my throat. The $28 crate at the supermarket came solely from my pre-marriage freelance residual royalties. Money had zero legal claim to. Cash I'd hoarded quietly for tiny pregnancy comforts I never dared ask him to fund. I didn't expect him to corner me mid-checkout, put on a public show of rage in front of a dozen staring shoppers, and hurl the sealed crate straight onto linoleum. Red fruit pulp burst everywhere, soaking my loose linen maternity dress like fresh blood splattering fabric. You don't hold a single full-time shift. You sit around the house all day doing nothing, and you blow nearly $300 on trivial fruit? Hao's voice carried across the entire produce aisle, every stranger's phone lifting to record our fight. Mortgage payments, all your prenatal scans, every expense this child will ever rack up lands on my shoulders. Do you think my client checks grow on trees? He didn't wait for me to respond, spun on his heel, and stormed out of the store, leaving me alone with judgmental eyes burning into my back. The cashier slid a pack of wet wipes across the counter without a word, her face tight with quiet pity. I didn't cry. I knelt down, belly heavy with our baby, and picked every bruised, split cherry back into the cracked plastic crate one by one. The sticky syrup coated my palms, cold and cloying, matching the hollow numbness settling deep in my chest. This wasn't just a fight over fruit. It was my final, deliberate chance to see if Hao could ever grasp basic compassion for me or our unborn child. If he could meet me halfway over something this small, there was nothing left worth salvaging between us. I dragged the leaking crate back to our townhouse. The second I pushed the front door open, loud FPS game audio blared through his gaming headset. He yelled trash talk into his microphone, completely oblivious to my state until I set the ruined cherry crate on the glass coffee table, juice pooling across the polished surface. He ripped the headset off, scowling hard at the mess. Why even drag that garbage home? You humiliated me in front of random strangers, and now you track sticky rot all over my furniture. He tossed the controller hard against the sofa cushions, rising to tower over me with aggressive, defensive posture he always leaned into whenever he knew he was in the wrong. My throat was raw from weeks of nonstop vomiting, but my tone stayed flat. No hysterics to give him fuel to paint me as an over-emotional housewife. That money's mine from work I did long before we met. I'm 6 months pregnant, can barely keep food down, and this is the only thing that eases the nausea. You had zero right to humiliate me publicly like that. Hao scoffed, crossing his arms tight over his chest, a physical tell he used to shut down every hard conversation we'd ever had. Pre-marriage assets become household funds the second you sign a marriage license. You bring zero monthly income into this home, so you forfeit any right to splurge on luxury snacks. That's simple household math. The doorbell cut him off mid-rant. A delivery courier stepped inside, holding 2 elaborate Baijiu gift boxes, handing over a digital signature pad for Hao to sign. The printed receipt sat plain on top of the packaging. Total cost $610 for high-end liquor reserved for his client schmoozing dinners. My stomach twisted harder than I had all morning just staring at the fancy, embossed packaging. $28 of fruit for my nausea is wasteful, but $600 of alcohol for your outings counts as a necessary business investment. I asked him straight. You don't understand professional networking at all. He turned away mid-conversation to shelve the bottles in his custom oak liquor cabinet, refusing to meet my gaze. This Liquor Lock's 6-figure project bids down the line. You sit at home pregnant with zero client connections to offer, so you have no ground to critique how I allocate work capital. He grabbed a spare blanket off the couch and slammed the guest bedroom door shut behind him, twisting the deadbolt to lock me out entirely. That night marked the start of 2 full weeks of unbroken cold silence. Day in and day out, I knocked on the guest room door begging for basic assistance with groceries or emergency prenatal supplies. All I heard was blaring game audio and rumbling snores through the wood. My hyperemesis worsened drastically without consistent nutrition or emotional support. Most meals came back up minutes after swallowing, leaving me lightheaded, so weak I could barely stand long enough to run a single load of laundry. One Saturday, Hao slept late inside the locked guest room. I sorted his work uniform from the laundry hamper, reaching into the tailored suit pocket and brushing against stiff receipt paper. I pulled it free and read the printed text line by line. Luxury dual VIP spa package. Total charge $820. Scheduled for the exact Wednesday he'd sworn he was stuck in mandatory corporate budget meetings. At the bottom of the slip, the signature line held meat cursive belonging to Meng Li, his 22-year-old intern, the girl he constantly called his little sister around the office. My blood ran cold. I marched to the guest room door and hammered my knuckles against the frame until Hao dragged the door open a crack, bleary-eyed and furious from interrupted sleep. I held the spa receipt inches from his face, so he couldn't miss the date or Meng's name written across the bottom. $800 on a couple's spa date while you lied about mandatory office meetings. A crate of cherries to calm my pregnancy sickness makes me a spendthrift, but private relaxation trips with your intern are justified overhead. Panic flashed across his face for half a heartbeat before defensive rage fully took over. He snatched the receipt out of my grasp, tore into tiny shreds, and tossed the fragments across the carpet. You rummaged through my personal pockets to dig up petty drama just to pick fights. That's toxic obsession. Meng drafts, bid documents, and drinks with difficult contractors after hours. Treating her to a spa session is standard workplace courtesy. All you do mope around the house complaining about minor pregnancy discomfort. You add zero professional value to my business, so you have no right to judge my spending habits. He grabbed his car keys and jacket off the entry hook, slamming the front door so hard the wall art rattled. He vanished for 3 straight nights with zero text or call checking on my deteriorating health. On the 4th night of Hao's disappearance, sharp cramping bloomed low in my abdomen, pulsing in stabbing waves that left me trembling flat on the mattress. The ache intensified minute by minute, morphing into a heavy dragging pressure radiating down my hips and thighs. I rolled onto my side, sweat soaking through my thin nightgown, fumbling for my primary cell phone on the nightstand to dial Hao's number. The automated voicemail tone played instantly. He'd fully blocked my personal line to avoid all contact with me. Panic spiked hard in my chest. I dug an old backup flip phone out of a storage drawer, inserted a dormant secondary SIM card I'd kept years prior, and redialed his number. This time the line connected, but loud club music and clinking glassware hummed in the background before a young feminine giggle echoed through the receiver. It was Meng Li's voice, playful and openly mocking, fully aware the unknown caller was me. Hey, who's blowing up Hao's line this late? Is that your housewife wife throwing another fit over fruit? I bit down hard on my lower lip to steady my shaking frame, fighting through waves of crippling abdominal agony to speak clearly enough for them to register the danger I was in. Put Hao on the phone right now and I'm 6 months pregnant with severe abdominal cramping. I need emergency hospital transport immediately. 2 seconds of quiet passed, then Meng's mocking laugh amplified louder through the speaker. Hao, it's your wife calling again. Everyone in our work group chat's been joking about that $200 cherry incident all week long. Hao slurred, irritable drawl cut through the club noise without a single trace of concern for my life-threatening symptoms. Just hang up on her. Leave her to stew a couple days, and she'll stop pulling pregnancy stunts to manipulate me. Every time I'm out networking with clients, she blows up my phone for attention. Ignore this call entirely. The line clicked dead mid-sentence, leaving only a flat dial tone buzzing in my ear. I set the flip phone down on the nightstand. The cramping surged harder, and warm, thin fluid soaked through my sheets beneath my hips, streaked with faint, dark red blood. I recognized every warning sign from every solo prenatal doctor's visit I'd attended alone. Placental abruption, an emergency risk that could kill both me and our unborn child without immediate surgical intervention. I pushed myself upright off the mattress, but my legs buckled the second my bare feet hit the floorboards. I dragged myself hand over hand across the carpet toward the building entryway, darkness closing in around the edges of my vision as I slipped and tumbled half a flight of concrete stairwell steps, my skull cracking hard against the metal safety handrail. A retired neighbor out walking her dog spotted me crumpled at the stair landing, blood seeping down my legs, and dialed emergency medical services straight away. Paramedics loaded me onto a trauma gurney and rushed me to the hospital's maternity emergency wing. The attending obstetrician flipped through my patient chart while nurses scrambled to prep an operating room, rushing to locate a legal next of kin to sign life-saving intervention paperwork. The hospital reception dialed Hao's saved primary contact number on my phone, relaying the full critical medical update at top speed. Mr. Chun Hao, your spouse Lin is experiencing severe placental abruption with massive internal hemorrhaging at 24 weeks gestation. The fetus has no detectable heartbeat and MS. Lin's life is at immediate fatal risk without emergency surgical intervention. You must arrive at this hospital at once to sign consent paperwork. Hao's drunk, sarcastic response crackled over the receiver without a single flicker of alarm. She's making up a dramatic hospital lie just to guilt-trip me over those stupid cherries. I'm not falling for this fake emergency performance. I'm hanging up and powering my phone off to block further false calls. He cut the communication mid-sentence and fully shut his device down to avoid any additional outreach from medical staff. When I regained consciousness hours later, harsh fluorescent hospital lights burned straight into my retinas. The obstetrician pulled a chair beside my hospital bed, a formal pathology report laid flat on the plastic tray between us, his expression heavy with quiet, unspoken sorrow. I'm truly sorry to deliver this devastating news, Ms. Lin. The combined damage from months of chronic malnutrition, unrelenting emotional stress, and your fall-triggered complete placental detachment. There is no fetal cardiac activity remaining. Termination of the pregnancy via emergency induction is mandatory to stop your internal bleeding and prevent life-threatening systemic infection. He slid his surgical consent form across the tray toward me, the designated spouse's signature lying blank at the bottom of the page. I stared at the empty signature field for a long stretch of time. Not a single tear surfaced in my eyes. Every fragile scrap of hope I'd clung to over 6 years of shared marriage had burned completely away in the hours I'd laid bleeding alone, abandoned by the man who'd fathered our child. A hollow, desolate emptiness settled heavy in my ribcage, far more agonizing than any physical wound I'd sustained that night. I reached for the black ballpoint pen the nurse handed over and scrawled my full legal name across the document where Hao's signature should have sat, ink bleeding thick into the paper fibers under the pressure of my tight grip. I consent to the full surgical procedure. Do not attempt further outreach to my husband at any point. the induction and subsequent uterine cleanup stretched for hours under mild intravenous sedation. Numbing medication dulled surface physical pain, yet I remained hyper-aware of every cold medical instrument working inside my body, every quiet reminder of the child I'd carried and lost solely due to Howe's deliberate, selfish neglect. I was wheeled back to a shared recovery ward afterward, surrounded by other new mothers whose partners hovered bedside with warm soup, insulated water bottles, and soft blankets. I sat isolated by the cold hospital window wall, no missed calls, unread texts, or concerned messages waiting on my recharged phone when a compassionate nurse plugged the dead device into a charger and handed it to me. I unlocked the screen and opened social media to pass the empty, lonely hospital hours. Howe's freshly posted update loaded front and center on my feed, geotagged the city's 5-star luxury buffet restaurant downtown. The photograph featured a platter overflowing bright red cherries, Meng Li's grinning half-face visible beside the fruit bowl, her arm draped casually over his shoulder. His typed caption read, "Free of gold-digging drama. Life's so much simpler. Women who throw tantrums over trivial luxury produce need to learn their place fast." Dozens of his drinking buddies filled the comment section with mocking, supportive replies bashing my character and celebrating his win over me. I paused for 1 second, tapped the like button on his post without a single emotional reaction to the cruelty of his words, then navigated straight into my phone's encrypted word processor to draft a fully legally airtight divorce agreement. Every receipt, call log, hospital medical record, and witness statement I'd quietly archived over months sat attached as digital evidence beneath the formal legal text I typed out line by line. 3 days post-surgery, I checked myself out of the hospital against standard extended recovery recommendations. My legs shook with unsteady weakness every single step I took, but I refused to linger in a medical space filled with constant reminders of the child I'd lost due to Howe's selfish cruelty. I took a single solo taxi back to the townhouse we'd shared for 6 full years, pushing the front door open to stagnant, stale indoor air thick with rot. The crate of ruined cherries I'd thrown on the supermarket floor still sat abandoned on the glass coffee table, mold sprouting fuzzy green-white fuzz across the crushed fruit flesh. I paid the rotting crate zero mind, walking straight down the hallway to the spare bedroom we'd spent months decorating as a nursery for our baby. I'd spent hundreds of unpaid weekend hours sanding, priming, and hand-brushing soft butter yellow wall paint across every surface of the room, assembling solid hardwood cribs by myself after Howe bailed on every assembly session to attend client drinking parties, folding stacks of infant onesies and knit blankets into custom closet organizers for months leading up to my due date. I retrieved a metal framing hammer from the storage closet beside the nursery door and went to work without hesitation. Blow after blow splintered the crib's wooden slats into jagged, splintered fragments. I tore through every folded infant garment with sharp kitchen shears, cutting fabric into useless strips that piled atop the wrecked bed frame in the center of the room. The physical exertion pulled tight at my fresh surgical incisions, a dull throbbing spreading across my lower abdomen, but I kept going until every trace of the shared nursery fantasy lay destroyed beyond repair. Once the room was reduced to splintered wreckage and shredded cloth, I showered and packed only my personal legal documents, archived professional design portfolios, and a small suitcase of clothing I'd owned long before marrying Howe. I printed a finalized hard copy of the divorce paperwork and set it prominently on the dining table, tucking a sealed red medical waste bag beside the pages, holding the official hospital termination discharge report stamped with bold red institutional verification. Howe stumbled through the front doorway at 8 p.m. that night, reeking of cheap liquor and Meng Li's floral perfume blend, his face twisting with disgust the second he inhaled the mildewed, rotting fruit air hanging heavy in the living room. "What mess did you make around the house today? The whole place reeks of rot and something metallic." He swapped his shoes and spotted the divorce papers spread across the dining table immediately, snatching the packet up to scan the first few lines with a dismissive, sneering glance. Pulling another dramatic separation stunt to force me into apologizing over that fruit nonsense? This performative victim act won't work on me anymore. I'm tired of your endless emotional manipulation. He spotted the sealed medical waste bag sitting beside the paperwork and ripped the zipper open to peek inside. The official hospital termination discharge certificate slipped out onto the wooden dining surface, landing face up, so the bold printed lines, 24 weeks gestation, 0 fetal heartbeat, emergency-induced termination sat directly in his line of sight. All cocky amusement and dismissive mockery vanished from his features in an instant, every trace of color draining from his cheeks until he looked deathly pale. "Lynn, what is this?" His voice shook thin, broken, barely loud enough to fill the quiet room. I did not respond, turning to grab my packed suitcase off the entry bench and wheel it toward the front door. He dropped the hospital paper and sprinted toward the master bedroom, throwing the door hard against the wall frame to find the closet space I'd claimed completely empty, every one of my toiletries removed from the bathroom sink counter. He bolted down the hallway to the nursery, staring at the splintered crib wreckage and shredded baby clothing stacked across the floor, panic fully overtaking his previous arrogance. He ran back to the living room, spotting the supermarket cherry receipt I'd tucked underneath our plain wedding band on the coffee table beside the moldy fruit crate. His hands shook violently as he fumbled for his smartphone, unlocking the screen to dial my number over and over again. Every call hit a disconnected automated tone. He switched to WeChat to send a desperate begging message, only to be met with a bright red rejection notification stating I'd blocked all his contact access entirely. I'd walked out of that townhouse carrying 0 of Howe's assets, none of our joint marital property. Only the clothes, credentials, and professional portfolio that had belonged to me long before I sacrificed my career for his ego. 3 months passed in quiet, deliberate rebuilding. I reconnected with my former industry mentor, Mr. Gu, the sole consistent supporter who never stopped reaching out during my 6 years of self-sacrificing domestic life. He tracked my career pause the second I stepped back to run House household, repeatedly offering a senior leadership role at his top-tier architecture firm Rwashing Design, waiting patiently for the day I'd reclaim my professional identity. I passed the firm's quarterly core project bid review single-handedly, drafting full construction schematics and client presentation decks that secured our biggest annual city development contract within weeks of rejoining the workforce. Standing at the head of the boardroom table to announce our win, I received thunderous applause from every member of my new design team. I was no longer the invisible, underappreciated housewife forced to beg for cheap fruit to soothe pregnancy nausea. I was Lynn, Chief Design Director of Rwashing Architecture, back in full control of my own career trajectory. My assistant pushed the boardroom door open mid-celebration, leaning in to deliver a quiet heads-up, low enough only I could hear. Director Lin, representatives from Xinhui Construction are waiting out front for their scheduled outsourcing negotiation meeting. Their lead project supervisor is Chun Hao, accompanied by his assistant Meng Li. I lifted my ceramic black coffee mug to my lips, letting the bitter dark roast settle across my tongue for a single slow breath before giving my calm, unwavering order. Show them into the conference room. Outside the glass conference entryway, Hao and Meng Li haggled with the front desk receptionist, Meng's tight figure-hugging work dress clinging to her frame as she pitched their company's proposal with overly sweet, performative politeness. Miss, we've been waiting over 2 full hours. We're here to negotiate a massive long-term outsourcing deal with your new director. We came prepared with complete bid documentation. The receptionist gestured toward the conference room doors. They're ready for you to step inside now. Hao smoothed his wrinkled dress tie, plastering a practiced professional sales grin across his face before pushing the glass door open. His polished corporate smile shattered the second his eyes locked onto me seated at the head of the 12-foot executive conference table, tailored black high-end designer blazer and 8-centimeter leather heels framing my frame as I rested both arms folded atop the polished wood surface. He froze mid-step, feet glued to the floor tiles, shock rendering him speechless for several long heartbeats. Lynn, is that really you? His voice cracked, high and unsteady, with complete disbelief. Meng Li stood directly behind him, her face twisting through a messy spectrum of shock, jealousy, and poorly hidden contempt as she took in my elevated status and polished professional styling. Hao snapped out of his stunned daze within seconds, rushing forward with open palms stretched out to grab my arm in a familiar, entitled gesture meant to pull me aside for a private, manipulative conversation. 2 uniformed building security officers stationed at either side of my chair stepped forward instantly, each grabbing one of his shoulders to pin him flat against the glass conference partition wall. He thrashed against their grip, yelling loud enough for every team member in the adjacent open office space to hear. Let go of me. This is my wife. We just need to talk privately. I stood slow and deliberate from my director's chair, adjusting the cuff of my blazer as I crossed the boardroom floor to stand directly in front of his pinned frame, my gaze level and cold as I spoke clear enough for every onlooker to register every word. Chun Hao, there is no spousal relationship remaining between us. Within these corporate walls, you address me as Director Lin. Hao's face burned bright red with a mix of humiliation and unhinged rage, eyes bulging as he strained against the security officer's hold to glare straight at me. I turned back to the conference table, picking up the thick-bound outsourcing bid document Xinhui Construction had submitted that morning, flipping through 2 pages before letting the full binder slip from my grasp to land with a loud crash directly into the waste bin at my feet. Your firm's proposal lacks basic industry integrity. Rwashing Design does not conduct business with trash organizations. Word of the confrontation spilled out into the office hallway within minutes, dozens of curious staff members gathering outside the glass partition to watch the unfolding scene. Meng Li's face flushed scarlet with embarrassment. She stormed forward past the security guards to point a trembling finger straight at my face, raising her voice loud enough for every bystander to hear her performative moral outrage. What kind of act are you putting on here? You're just a discarded ex-wife who faked a miscarriage to extort money from Chun Hao. How does a woman who couldn't even afford $200 fruit qualify as a high-level design director at a major architecture firm? I did not engage with her screaming accusation, simply nodded at my assistant standing beside the wall-mounted projector screen. Pull up the evidence folder I shared to the conference tablet, broadcast at full screen. The wall-length projection screen flickered to life, displaying sequential digital documents line by line as my laser pointer traced red highlighted sections for the entire room to view clearly. First slide, Xing Construction's internal procurement approval log, marked with 30% inflated material cost entries signed jointly by Hao and Meng Li. Second slide, verified third-party supplier real price quotes proving the pair had falsified every construction supply line item to siphon off excess corporate funds. Third slide, 3 consecutive nights of 5-star luxury hotel check-in records billed as client entertainment expenses, alongside the $820 dual spa receipt I'd kept archived from months prior. Over the past 6 months, you two colluded to inflate all project procurement pricing by 30%. The diverted $40,000 plus US dollars in stolen corporate funds were transferred directly to Meng Li's mother's personal bank account. That dual spa visit you billed as client outreach was a private date between the two of you, 0 actual clients present. Mid-explanation, the main office entrance doors swung open wide, Xinhui Construction CEO Wang marching inside flanked by 2 corporate legal counsel attorneys. I'd forwarded a full confidential integrity evaluation report to his personal email an hour before Howe's scheduled negotiation slot, attaching every piece of fraud evidence I'd archived over months of quiet research after discovering their embezzlement scheme during our marriage. CEO Wong's face turned deep purple with unbridled fury the second he scanned the highlighted financial records displayed across the projector screen. He stepped forward without hesitation and delivered a sharp, loud, open-handed slap across Meng Li's cheek, the sound echoing through the silent "You ungrateful traitor. I plan to promote you to senior project manager next quarter, and you steal company funds right under my nose?" He spun to face Hao, gesturing toward the security officers holding him captive against the glass wall. "Both of you are terminated effective immediately. We're filing formal criminal charges for embezzlement and corporate fraud with the Economic Crimes Division of the Police Department today. Prepare to face multi-year prison sentences for the stolen company capital." Meng Li crumpled to the carpeted floor, knees buckling under the weight of the incoming felony charges. Hao stood rigid against the glass partition, all color drained from his skin, unable to utter a single word of defense as building security escorted him toward the building elevator bank to wait for police arrival. The rain lashed down in thick, unbroken sheets after the disastrous Xinhui meeting, dark storm clouds swallowing the downtown skyline whole as I wrapped up the day's project sign-offs and prepared to leave the office. My assistant held my tailored wool trench coat for me by the lobby glass doors, and I spotted the chaotic scene on the plaza before I even stepped outside. A beat-up flatbed delivery truck sat parked dead center of the courtyard. Its rear gate swung wide open, hundreds of crates of glossy red cherries stacked high inside, rainwater washing over the fruit skins and dripping onto the concrete pavement below. And on his knees in the puddles directly beneath the truck's bumper was Chen Hao, soaked head to toe, matted hair plastered to his forehead, expensive work clothes ruined by mud and rainwater. He'd seen my car pull up through the glass lobby walls and scrambled over as fast as he could on his knees, dragging himself across the flooded asphalt toward my position the second I stepped out the building's front doors. "Lynn, I know I messed up every single thing." His voice cracked through the patter of rain, palms slapping hard against the wet pavement over and over in a desperate display of self-abasement, loud sharp smacks echoing across the empty plaza. He didn't pause to wipe the rain and tears streaming down his face, eyes bloodshot and wild with panic. I drove to every wholesale fruit market in the whole city this morning, emptied every cent I had left to buy this entire truckload of cherries. All for you. Whatever amount you wanted, however many crates you need, it's all yours, no arguments, no fights anymore. Just come back home with me. I'll take care of every single thing for the rest of my life. I'll never raise my voice at you again. I stood motionless under the large branded lobby umbrella the doorman held out for me, watching him writhe in the mucky rain without a flicker of sympathy or even faint sadness. 6 months prior, a single small crate of this exact fruit had been my last shot at seeing a shred of humanity in him. Back then, my body was racked with unending morning sickness, carrying our unborn child, and all I'd asked for was one tiny luxury that could ease my constant agony. He'd publicly humiliated me, thrown the fruit to the ground, and written me off as a greedy burden for daring to seek a moment of comfort. Now that his career, income, reputation, and future had all crumbled to dust, he thought a mountain of cherries could erase every irreversible wound he'd inflicted. Lost baby, broken body, 6 wasted years of my prime professional life, endless emotional abuse and neglect. I took one slow, quiet step forward, my leather heels sinking slightly into the shallow rain puddle separating us, my tone flat, devoid of anger or sorrow, only cold, unshakable clarity. That day in the supermarket, that one box of cherries was my final chance to see if you could care about anyone other than your own pride and convenience. You threw it on the floor, screamed at me in front of strangers, left me stranded there alone to clean up the mess by myself. You chose your ego over your pregnant wife's suffering back then. Now you have no right to stand here on your knees offering truckloads of the same fruit, acting like a few crates can fix everything you destroyed. His mouth fell open, ready to beg and make more empty promises, but I cut him off before he could utter another word, lifting one foot to kick a loose, unsealed cherry crate that sat at the edge of the truck's tailgate. The thin cardboard split open on impact, dozens of ripe dark cherries spilling out to roll straight into the murky sewer drain beside the puddle, disappearing into the dark muck below. He watched the fruit wash away and let out a strangled whimper, reaching out as if he wanted to grab them back before realizing how pointless the gesture was. A sleek black Maybach pulled up alongside the curb right on schedule. My business partner grew rolling down the rear passenger window to signal for the driver to hold the door open for me. Goo's gaze drifted past Hal's crumpled, soaked form without the slightest glance of acknowledgement, focusing solely on me as he held out a folded cashmere towel through the open window. The award gala speech draft's been finalized by our PR team. We're running 10 minutes behind schedule if we linger here too long. I folded the towel over my arm and turned my back fully on Hao, no longer willing to waste a single second of my evening indulging his performative remorse. I'm ready to go. I climbed into the warm, dry back seat of the vehicle, the door clicking shut behind me as the car slowly pulled away from the plaza. Hao scrambled to his feet in the rain, sprinting barefoot through the puddles to chase the vehicle's rear bumper, screaming my name at the top of his lungs until his voice grew hoarse, his figure shrinking smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror as we pulled onto the main highway, vanishing entirely from sight. Inside the quiet luxury car, Gu passed me a warm bottle of herbal tea to calm my nerves, his expression gentle but understanding, having known every detail of what I endure. I've watched you bury your career and sacrifice yourself for someone who never valued you for years. It's a relief to see you finally prioritize your own peace and success. I sipped the tea slowly, staring out the tinted window at the city lights streaking past, no lingering weight of guilt clinging to my chest anymore. All the years I'd spent bending over backward to cater to his every demand, every time I'd cut my own expenses to fund his vanity purchases, every sleepless night I'd spent worrying over our child while he partied with his intern, none of it weighed on me any longer. He'd made every cruel choice entirely of his own free will, and the consequences were solely his to bear, not mine to fix. A few days later, Howe stumbled back to the empty mortgage townhouse he'd once called our shared home, the space cold and dark, every trace of warmth long stripped away after I'd moved out for good. He fumbled to turn on his phone's weak flashlight and dragged a tattered cardboard storage box out from under the master bed, a beat-up leather notebook tucked inside that I'd kept throughout my entire pregnancy. He sank onto the bare wooden floor and flipped open the cover, his eyes tracing each handwritten entry one line at a time, his hands beginning to shake harder with every page he turned. May 12th entry. Howe's work dress, shoes split open at the toe. His client dinners rely on polished footwear. I returned the prenatal calcium and folic acid supplements I bought with my limited budget to get a full refund, used that cash to order a 2,000 yuan pair of leather dress shoes for him. Sorry, little one, we'll cut back on vitamins this month. I'll find cheaper groceries to make up for it. Page after page held identical, devastating records. I'd skipped fresh meat and fruit for months on end, surviving solely on discounted plain noodles and stale vegetables, just so I could splurge on designer button-down shirts for him, expensive bottles of baijiu he used to schmooze clients, fancy spa gift cards for his own leisure trips. Every single dollar I'd saved to care for myself and our unborn baby had been diverted to feed his endless vanity, while he turned around and spent 520 yuan in the same exact week I'd bought those cherries to send a romantic red envelope to Mengli, a note on the transfer reading, treat my little sister to bubble tea. Howe scrolled through his own WeChat transaction history to confirm the transfer date matched the supermarket cherry incident, and a violent wave of nauseating guilt crashed over him all at once, a thick rush of bitter blood surging up his throat. He doubled over and heaved a mouthful of bright red blood all over the pages of my handwritten ledger, the dark liquid smearing across my neat handwriting, blurring every record of the sacrifices I'd made for him over half a decade of marriage. He clutched his chest tightly, collapsing onto the floor and rolling back and forth in crippling physical agony, hot tears mixing with the blood pooling on the notebook's paper, unable to process the full scale of the harm he'd inflicted on me and the child we'd lost together. He'd spent years demanding I live in constant frugality for his benefit while splashing cash on another woman without a single second of remorse, and the weight of his own cruelty finally crushed him completely. Word of Howe's public breakdown at the office plaza and the full exposure of his corporate fraud quickly spread to his elderly mother, who'd always sided with her son and blamed every marital conflict solely on me for being too demanding and failing to give him a son to carry the family line. She packed 2 distant rural female relatives into a taxi and marched straight to the front entrance of Weixing's downtown office tower during the lunch rush hour, hauling a frayed clothesline pole strung with a large white protest banner covered in bold black marker accusations. Heartless, murderous daughter-in-law. Give back our grandson. She planted herself dead center of the pedestrian plaza out front, sitting on the concrete flower bed edge and wailing at the top of her lungs, drawing a massive crowd of office workers, street passersby, and independent short video content creators who immediately pulled out their phones to record the spectacle for online platforms. This vicious woman killed my unborn grandson just to run off and chase a fancy corporate career. She's a cold-blooded killer who abandoned her family for money. My security team moved to intercept her and escort her off the premises before the scene escalated further, but I waved them off, stepping calmly through the crowd to stand directly in front of her without raising my voice or showing a single ounce of anger. I signaled my assistant to pull out a portable Bluetooth speaker and crank the volume all the way up, playing the unedited audio recording captured the night I'd gone into emergency labor, the sound of Howe's drunk, dismissive tone clear as day over every speaker. Leave her alone for a few days. She's just using the pregnancy to manipulate me for favors. Don't answer any of her calls. Meng Li's mocking laughter echoed right after his words, silencing every murmur of gossip rippling through the crowd instantly. After the audio finished playing, I lifted a thick stack of officially stamped hospital documents high enough for every onlooker to read the bold printed text on the top sheet. Severe placental abruption caused by chronic emotional neglect and malnutrition. Patient self-executed surgical consent after legal next of kin refused all emergency contact attempts. I held up the phone showing the hospital's recorded phone logs from that night to prove how I'd ignored multiple urgent medical calls and powered his device off entirely. The crowd's collective sentiment flipped on a dime, every bystander turning their criticism toward Howe and his mother instead of me, dozens of people speaking up to call out their shameless, false public slander. As the old woman stood frozen, lost for words after the full truth came out, Howe forced his way through the ring of onlookers to try and drag her away from the plaza before more footage was recorded and circulated online. His mother spun around the second she saw his face and raised her palm hard across his cheek, a loud crack echoing across the entire courtyard. It's your fault we lost that grandbaby. You're the worthless one who abandoned your pregnant wife to fool around with other women, not her. She grabbed his shirt collar and rained more slaps and screams down on him as every phone camera captured their ugly family brawl, footage destined to go viral across every local social media platform within hours.